how much prep do you typically do for a podcast episode, and how do you prep for a show?
So our podcast is boxing based, which makes my job very, very easy because with me being involved with this so long and having the kind of intuition that I have, it's really easy for me to watch just a couple of rounds of boxing. Hold on, Diggy. And I'm gonna know exactly how this fight's gonna play itself out, you know. So I try to have a notebook with me. I try to write things down, and I just try to make sure that, you know, once that red light comes on, I don't forget anything, you know. So most of the writing down and things of that nature is just so that I make sure that I don't miss anything.
How do you feel like, how does the amount of prep that you do for a show affect the quality of your performance, or do you think it does at all? Every
time. And that's what I started to do. So when I started doing live TV on fight nights, I'm a sponge, so how my dad taught me to be. And so I'm just watching everybody and everyone who's been doing this for, 20 plus years. They all have notebooks. They've all got papers. Everything's written down. Everything's printed up already. And as we're moving along through the night, they're ripping stuff up, tossing it over their shoulder. Let's go on to the next segment. Those type of things. And I found that to be very effective for me on TV. Hey, gotta be quiet, okay? Gotta be quiet.
What's up?
Say hi, Hazy. Okay. Shh. I found
like your hair. Oh, they can't probably hear me, can they?
Yeah. No. I found that to be very effective when I was doing live TV. I started writing down my notes, started going on, and I felt more ready. And so when we first started the podcast, it was like, yeah, we watched the fights. Let's do it. Yeah, we watched the fights. Let's do it. And I always felt like I was missing something. And then so eventually I just said, you know what? In order for this podcast to be as good as it can be, and I don't want to cheat anybody, I have to do my homework. Hold on. I have to do my homework. And so, yeah, I do prep, and it definitely works.
So you kind of talked about your interview style a little bit earlier. How much prep do you do before hosting an interview? And I know, to my view, when I see you doing interviews, it seems very impromptu. It seems just kind of improvised. How much of that is kind of prepared, and how much of that is you just kind of coming up with stuff on the fly?
It's coming up with stuff on the fly. I think that's the next step for me, is to start preparing myself when we have a guest, to be really ready for that guest. I've seen Ant do it, and it impresses me that Ant's gone to another level too. When we first started the podcast, Ant said, literally, I'm not studying nothing. I'm not writing nothing down. I'm just, y'all let me know when to be there, and I'll come in and do the show. Should I stop? I'm working. He's like, yeah, I'll come in and do the show. Now that man preps himself, and he's ready anytime we have a guest, which I find to be very, very impressive. So that's the next step for me, is to start really getting ready for the guests that we have on our show. I don't like being as impromptu. I'm not gonna lie, I impress myself. Which I think is why I've continued to do it. But I know I need to move out of that and move into more of a professional way of carrying on interviews.
So as someone who's been on both sides of an interview, what, in your opinion, makes for a good interview, and what does each person kind of need to bring to the table?
For me, the number one thing with the interview, I don't like interviews to be QA. I think that's bland. I think that's boring. I think that's what everybody sees and expects. I like for my interviews to be conversations. And I like for the conversation to drive the next question, to drive the next answer. And so that's how I like to carry on my interviews. I think that it's much more fun, and people can see how real it is, and it's not just QA asking the questions that everybody expects to be asked.
Sure. So last question for you here. Just generally speaking, what universal advice could you offer to help someone just be a better, more engaging podcast host?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to sound very simple, very cliche, but be yourself. That's how I got where I am. And, disclaimer, that may not work for everyone. Some people may actually need gimmicks. Some people may actually need an alter ego or a character to kind of become in order to pull this off. But for me, the best advice that I could give is be yourself. If you like to have fun, don't turn on your podcast and then all of a sudden you turn off the fun. Keep the fun on, dial it up. You know, that's kind of how I live my life. I just try to make everything as real and as genuine as possible. So that would be the best advice I could give. And then of course, you know, if you are someone that can prep or things like that, do your homework. I think that when you do your homework, it disguises any flaws that may be in your game. If you haven't done the homework, everyone's going to see the flaws. They'll see the stuttering. They'll see the second guessing. They'll see the eyes going both ways. What's next? You know. So yeah, do your homework and be yourself.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's what you've done, Hafey.
Thank you. Thank you. How'd I do today? Rate my performance.
I appreciate you, man. You know that. Five gloves, man. 5 gloves.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here, Shawn. I appreciate your time. Be sure to go check out the Porter Way podcast on YouTube or wherever you happen to watch or listen to podcasts. And if you do check it out, make sure you let them know that Ryan from the Creative Control Room podcast sent you over there. Shawn, we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you very much.
You got it, man. Thank you.